Hello, good afternoon. This is the Q&A event for the Economists Returners Programme. I'm Michael Francis, I'm an economics advisor in the team. We're going to start off with a few presentations from the team shortly. And there'll be a good amount of time for questions after that, and we're keen to make this really useful to you. So please do ask questions and direct that discussion. Just a little bit of admin. So the first part of the session will be recorded, and then the recording will be stopped for the questions. Ask people to use their mute if they're not speaking, and in case anybody has a bit of a shaky internet, we'll try to keep cameras generally off when we're not talking. So with that, I will pass over to Jenny for the first presentation.
Thanks very much, Michael, and welcome everybody. My name's Jenny Haydock, and I'm one of the Deputy Chief Economists here at the CMA, and I've been asked by my colleagues to give a few introductory comments about this programme and why we're doing it. So really, this is about, for us, widening our candidate pool as much as we possibly can and ensuring that the people who work as economists at the CMA come from a diverse range of backgrounds and that nobody is excluded from working here. And this is particularly relevant in this context, post-COVID, where we know a lot of people have had to take time out of the workforce. And so we're really keen to tap into that pool of people and to encourage them to at least think about a career at the CMA. This is, for us, really important, and it aligns with the priorities of the senior leadership of the Econ team and the wider CMA, which is really focused on improving diversity at the CMA and ensuring that we are as inclusive an organisation as possible. But it's also consistent with the way that we work here. In particular, a number of the senior leadership within the Econ team work part-time, have caring responsibilities, have flexible working patterns. And so this is something that we don't just advocate for, we actually live it. I'd also just want to say briefly how much I think the CMA is a fantastic place to work. We do really interesting economics every single day with a lot of really lovely colleagues. We also have a lot of flexibility in the way we work and how we work, including a hybrid model. And a lot of people have a lot of commitments outside of work. We also have a lot of training and support that's available, and that's at the heart of this Returners Programme as well, which you'll hear more about in a moment. But this really is a fantastic place to be a microeconomist. So I would strongly encourage you to consider the CMA as somewhere to work. And if you think the Returners Programme would work for you, then please do apply. So I will leave it pretty much there because I'll hand over to my colleagues who have a lot more detail and info to give you. And then, as Michael said, a Q&A that I hope everyone will find useful. But thank you very much for your time and your interest. I hope that this session is useful and that in due course, I see you as a colleague here at the CMA. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Martina now.
Great. Thank you very much, Jenny, for the introductions. So my name is Martina Prosperetti, and I'm an Assistant Director of Economics here at the CMA, and I'm based in London. So I'm just going to briefly describe the Economics Returners Programme. I think maybe people are already familiar with that, but given if you might see sort of what we already put out, but just sort of to refresh everyone's memories of what this program is about and a few of the details. So we have launched the program to recruit candidates who have not worked as a professional economist for at least 2 years. And the successful applicants will be offered a flexible fixed-term contract with the possibility of transitioning into a permanent role at the end of that. So if you're successful, you will join us as an economic advisor. And I think, as Jenny started to allude to already, the work here is very interesting. And as an economic advisor, you can work flexibly across the full range of our projects. You can specialize in certain areas, and you can be, for example, a lead economist in some cases, or lead on particular areas of analysis in more complex cases. You will be responsible for carrying out economic analysis or supervise others who do the economic analysis themselves more directly. And a very important part of our work is presenting results and provide economic advice to decision makers and our colleagues. So this is at the heart of the role of economic advisors. And beyond that, you also have an opportunity to manage and develop others and contribute to the wider development of the economics group here at the CMA. In terms of sort of the key feature of the Econ Returners Programme, I would highlight two of them. So the first one is that as part of the program, you will have some dedicated time, up to 20% of your time, to pursue a wide range of training opportunity that we offer here at the CMA, and also would provide some support for you to sort of facilitate the transition back into the workplace. And Adish will speak a bit more about sort of the training and the support that we offer. But just to give you sort of a few highlights, I suppose, there will be a buddy within the CMA economics group that can sort of support you with the practical aspects of returning to work. Alongside this, we'll offer also an initial and ongoing support from a mentor for long-term guidance and career and personal development. And there is a wide range of training courses on economics and sort of other soft skills that we offer, but there are more details that Adish will talk about it a bit later. The second key feature of the program that I would highlight, and again, Jenny sort of alluded to that, is sort of the flexibility that here we offer at the CMA. So I think you will have the opportunity and the technology that enables you to work for 60% of your time outside the office. And for the remaining of your time, you can choose to work from any of our offices. We have offices in Belfast, Cardiff, Edinburgh, London, or Manchester. And also beyond sort of the location, there are also lots of options for different working patterns. Beyond obviously full-time, there also we offer part-time, compressed hour, and flexible patterns that personally myself, I work part-time, and as Jenny said, quite a few people in the leadership team also do that. So I just wanted to sort of briefly sort of highlight what are sort of the main feature of the Returners Programme. And now I'll pass over to Michael again, that will sort of set us up for the next part of our presentation, where you can hear more about some of the aspects of the program.
Thank you very much, both of you. So we've now got a few presentations to go into more detail about how we work and the training and other things. So I think first is Marie.
Hello, so I'm Marie Clark. I'm an Assistant Director of Economics. I'm based in London, and I've worked for many years at the CMA and predecessor organisations. I'm going to talk about various topics related to sort of how we work, so sort of picking up where sort of Martina just left off. So as Martina has mentioned, there is considerable flexibility around your sort of working patterns, how you work, where you work, when you work. In addition to the usual sort of part-time, full-time, you can work longer days, shorter days. You know, I work full-time hours in 4 days. And importantly, there is also flexibility about how you manage these hours from week to week. You don't have to work exactly the same. While your contracted hours will be the same, you don't have to work at the same pattern every week. So with regard to where we work, as Martina mentioned, we now have a number of offices. You will be based in one office, but you can have the option, if it's suitable, to work in others. So 40% of your time you will need to spend in a CMA office, subject to certain agreed exemptions, which means that you do have a flexibility to work up to 60% of your time, you know, at home or other suitable locations. And you same again, you don't have to work the same days in the office each week. Typically what you find is that people will come in on days when they have important meetings at sort of key stages in a case. For example, sort of meetings we have with decision makers, or more generally the sort of more formal meetings. Moving on to sort of how we work. So as an economist, you would expect your work to be project-based, and that would be whether it's sort of internal projects or external casework. You would expect to work in teams, and those teams often to be multidisciplinary. This may be working with with colleagues in statistics, econometrics, or data science, but you could also expect often to be working with colleagues in other professions in the CMA, so the delivery teams, the legal teams, and our group of financial and business advisors. And those members, team members, may be based in the same office as you or other CMA offices. And I think this sort of mix of teams, both their location and disciplines, has implications for how we work and how we sort of interact with each other. With regard to sort of remote working, the CMA has come a long way in recent years, and we attach a considerable importance to ensuring sort of that we are sort of inclusive in the way we work. And just to give an example of that, we now have a sort of well-established etiquette in how we run meetings remotely. So, for example, as we're doing now, we all will connect into the meetings online. Even if most people are in the same room, we raise our hands before speaking. And my experience is that meetings now work better generally, sort of regardless of where people are located. But you could expect in most team meetings a sizable portion of people to be sort of joining remotely. With regard to how we interact, you can expect regular case team meetings with decision makers. These can vary in their level of sort of formality and their size. Cases will typically be managed or sort of led by colleagues in our delivery team, but sort of be assured that economics and economists, are central to almost everything the CMA does. And outside of these more structured meetings, you can also expect to just generally be working very closely with others. While you might expect to spend much of your time with colleagues to be in a sort of project-related setting, there will also be regular opportunities to interact with other economists. You're going to hear from others about the role of line managers and buddies and mentors. And in addition to that, there will be opportunities to participate in regular economist team meetings, internal, external seminars, social events sort of outside sort of normal working hours. I'm now just going to move on to how, as economists, we're allocated to projects. So this is determined within the profession, the economics profession. You can expect to have the opportunity over time to work across sort of various CMA functions. At any one time, you might be allocated to one project or more. Individuals' preferences and objectives will be taken into account. And it's also worth noting that there can be sort of flexibility within case teams, particularly the larger ones, on the nature of the work you're doing, the role that you have. For example, in which work streams you get allocated to, or the sort of level of responsibility you take on. There are also sort of opportunities outside of sort of coursework to build your sort of wider sort of management, communication, and sort of other skills and experience, and networks more generally. There are various working groups within econ focusing on sort of different sort of topics. Many of us will get involved in recruitment exercises, and there are also opportunities outside the econ group. For example, as a member of sort of various groups and networks within the CMA. Before I hand over to one of my colleagues, I'd just like to say a few words that about CMA's sort of values and how this is reflected in the way we work. So respectful, inclusive, collaborative working relationships are really at the heart of how we work. For example, we have mandatory objectives for all staff and managers, which include sort of supporting sort of the performance and development of others, and sort of a commitment to building and retaining sort of diverse and inclusive workplace. And supporting people in their development is then embedded in how we participate and manage cases. Yeah, I think an example here is the considerations are taken into account in the allocation of economists to our work. I'm going to finish there, and I think now I'm handing over to Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. So I'm Adam Catlin-Jones, another assistant director. I'm talking a bit about the sort of work you'd actually be doing if you came here as an economics officer. So I think, as Marie was saying, economists at the CMA are pretty central to nearly all of the work the CMA does, and that means that there are lots of different types of projects that you can get involved with here. A lot of what we do is around mergers, market studies, and looking at anti-competitive practices. So we look at when companies want to merge, we see if it's going to be harmful for competition of consumers. Market studies, we can look more broadly at a particular market, and we've looked at things like energy and banking, and more recently some more sort of digital markets like online advertising. And we look at sort of how that market is working and if there are things that are going wrong in those markets for consumers. And we look at sort of anti-competitive practices that particular companies might have been using and what sort of harm those could have done to consumers. And more recently, we've could be sort of expanding the types of things we do, and there are more opportunities for economists. So, for example, we're recently setting up or going to be setting up a digital markets unit, looking in more depth at some digital markets, as well as some new functions in areas like subsidy advice. But the core job of an economist here, in whatever sort of case you're working on, most of the time is there's a specific market, and we're looking at it and trying to understand, from a kind of microeconomic perspective, how does that market work, and what could be going wrong with competition if we allow a certain merger to go ahead, or if certain practices are going on in that market. It's generally a pretty broad question, and that means that the type of work we do is quite varied. There are lots of different things that you have to do as part of that process going through a project. Generally, the cases you work on will go through a few different phases, and the work kind of changes as you go along. But there's sort of involvement for economists throughout. So in early stages, we're generating hypotheses about how the market works, how mergers might harm competition, or how certain aspects of kind of conduct in the market might be harmful. So really kind of applying sort of economic thinking to markets. Then we do a lot of evidence gathering. The CMA has quite broad kind of powers to gather information from stakeholders in these markets. We put a lot of work into thinking about what kind of evidence we need to test our hypotheses and how to go about gathering that. Analysing the evidence we get, and that tends to be pretty varied as well. There is sort of a role for kind of quantitative data analysis, but there's also a lot of kind of qualitative work that we do. And a really important part of that is there's a lot of sort of judgment involved as well. We get a lot of evidence in from different sources, and you've got a sort of important role to play in reaching a view on actually what should our recommendations be here. And then economists are involved in presenting those findings as well. So internally making recommendations to decision makers, and then externally sort of writing up the reports that we publish on our findings. So as an economics advisor, you'd be very involved in all of these stages. It's a role that includes sort of responsibility for really shaping the economic thinking on a case as we go through, as part of a wider economics team, and as Marie said, working with other professions as well. But the economics advisor role is really sort of central to that, and sometimes also involves managing one or two more junior economists to kind of contribute to the project as well. Looking at sort of a bit more kind of practically, what would that look like on an individual case? One type of case that we do a lot of is phase one, sort of early merger investigations. The way these cases typically work, when you first get started on one of these cases, there's some sort of reading and thinking to do. When two companies want to merge, they'll send us a notice with their sort of information on the companies and the markets, and a bit of spin about how that this merger will not cause any problems to competition, and we compete with loads of different companies. And your role at that stage is to kind of read this quite skeptically, think about how could this market be working, thinking about theories of how the merger could potentially be harmful, and having kind of conversations within the econ team and the wider team about what are we going to look at here, what are we going to focus on, what evidence do we need to gather. Then we get to the evidence gathering stage, where you're calling up some of the sort of stakeholders in the market, for example, customers, to understand things a bit better, how it works, and preparing more formal information requests to kind of gather the evidence we need. Then you would be involved in the analysis stage, with that mix of kind of quantitative and qualitative analysis. So, for example, you could be calculating market shares based on data gathered from across the market, or you could be trying to kind of summarize and synthesize what the customers in the market think about the different competitors out there, and using all of that to kind of form a view on whether the merger would be harmful or not. You'd have various sort of internal meetings at different milestones. There'll be a lot of opportunities to present to decision makers and make recommendations about what decisions they should be making. And finally, the economists are involved all the way through to writing up the kind of the reports that we publish. And so a really core skill here is being able to write about economics, but for an audience who are not necessarily economists. So hopefully that gives a bit of a flavour of what the work here is like, what kind of things you might be doing day to day. I'm just going to finish by highlighting a couple of things that I particularly kind of like about working here as an economist, why I think it's, as Jenny said earlier, a really good place to work for a microeconomist. One thing is the variety. I mean, as I've kind of gone through, the work over the course of a case changes a lot, but between cases, it's always different as well. There are all the different types of cases we work on, but also every market is different. I've worked on cases about smartphones and app stores, robot vacuum cleaners, local vets, car parts. It kind of ranges from really high tech to really low tech, really industrial stuff. And from kind of looking at big global markets that are in the news to really small individual local areas in the UK. But whichever it is, you always kind of learn something interesting that you didn't know before. The other thing I think is really good about working here with an economist is you are actually using your economics. It's not just a kind of generic analyst type of role. You have to really think about markets and incentives and apply economic concepts. But at the same time, it's practical rather than really academic, and you have to sort of make it fit the real life markets that we're looking at. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what the economist role here is like. I'm gonna pass over to Adish now to tell you more about the training and support we offer.
Hi everybody, my name is Adish. By way of introduction, I'm an assistant economist. I've been at the CMA for a little over a year now, and I'll be talking to you about the kind of trainings and support that we offer at the CMA. Broadly speaking, the training at the CMA is offered by two bodies. So the first set of trainings is offered by the Economist Group, and the second more widely by the CMA via the CMA Academy. So I'll just talk you through the individual kind of trainings that are offered. So to start off, let's talk about the trainings that are offered by the economists for the economist group as a whole. These trainings are divided into two categories. So firstly, you have case-specific trainings that help you perform better on the case that you're working on. And next, you have wider trainings that help you develop better as an economist more broadly. In terms of case-specific trainings, as soon as you join, all new joiners and returners are provided with induction sessions about the different tools that we work at the CMA. So we work across multiple tools like phase one mergers, phase two mergers, markets, and enforcement. So this session is really useful to understand what the tool is, and more importantly, what is your role as an economist on the tool. Further, as touched upon previously, economic advisors tend to work as the lead economists on phase one cases, on phase two cases, and market studies. You have to work across multidisciplinary teams and be in charge of a dedicated piece of analysis. So of course, there's a lot of work that goes on in the background. So we have skill sessions that tell you how to run a phase one merger, how to run a phase two merger and market studies. These sessions are incredibly useful in understanding the timelines of the cases, how to best utilize your time, what is expected from you, and what the final output should look like. For instance, I've just finished working on a phase two merger, and before I started that merger, I'd seen the skill session on running a phase two merger. It was incredibly useful to understand how to best use my time. Apart from that, as Marie touched upon previously, as economists at the CMA, a large part of our daily work involves presenting economic analysis, communicating and influencing senior decision makers, reviewing internal docs. So these soft skills are something that we provide training for as well. These trainings are conducted by the more senior colleagues who have been doing these tasks since forever. Uh, so they are best placed to know the more efficient ways of doing it. It's always good to understand how that works. For instance, when I was analyzing internal docs for the first time, the training was really useful in building a strong foundation to understand what's the best way to present that analysis. So I really found that very useful. So this was the case specific training. We also have wider trainings. For instance, we have advanced competition economics seminars. These are targeted towards the more technical issues that you are likely to see in markets today. For instance, it involves things like the economics of tying and bundling of products, how digital markets work, how two-sided platforms work. So if you're ever working on a case that involves such technical concepts, these seminars are really useful in understanding the kind of economics questions that you're going to face in your casework. Um, Apart from that, our econometrics team also provides courses on data analysis. These are specifically based on using Stata and R, and most of them are targeted towards beginners. So it's based on the assumption that you have little to no knowledge of these softwares, so they're a good starting point to understand how these softwares work. But at the same time, if you're already comfortable with them, there are advanced courses as well to take you to the next level. Lastly, if you ever feel like you're losing touch with the latest happenings in the world of industrial economics, you need not worry, because at the CMA, we also have lunchtime seminars where we essentially invite researchers and professors from across the UK universities to come in and present their analysis and talk to us about their findings. So that was a training that the economics group offers, but we also offer a lot of support for new joiners. Now, I think this is one of our key deliverables that sort of sets us apart from other potential places that you can work at. We don't just throw you into the deep end of things, but rather it's a process of hand-holding till you get comfortable with the job and you're ready to like step up and perform it. So in terms of support, firstly, from the day you join, you'll be allocated a buddy who's someone at the same grade. So they are also economic advisors. They will know what is expected from the role and will be best placed to advise you more informally about the ways of working at the CMA. We've had this scheme for a very long time now, and it is incredibly useful in initial months when you're still getting comfortable with life at the CMA. Secondly, you will always have a line manager. A line manager is essentially someone one grade above you. So in your case, it would be an economics assistant director. So you work with your line manager very closely to achieve your work and development objectives. So every calendar year, you set development objectives for yourself, and You have regular catch-ups with your line manager to understand how your progress is going, what needs to change. So it's a process of regular interaction. It is very tailored to your liking. For instance, when I started off at the CMA, I used to meet my line manager once a week, but as and when I got more comfortable, I started meeting him once in 2 weeks. But at the same time, you can meet them on a more ad hoc basis to discuss any issues that you're facing or if something has come up. Um, Apart from that, lastly, we also have a very solid mentorship program. So you work with your economic mentor over a longer period to develop your career ambitions. So questions like where you see yourself in 5 years is better suited for discussion with a mentor. I think around once in 6 months, we release a list of mentors with the description and the areas of specialty on which they can provide you mentorship advice on. And based on that list, you can tailor your requirements and match a mentor and meets your career ambitions. So that's everything on support and training by the Economist Group. But the CMA more broadly also provides trainings via the CMA Academy. These are essentially further study opportunities that they provide. So it's obviously something much more long term. So if you have an undergraduate degree and if you want to do a master's, the CMA can provide funding for that. There's also an option of studying part-time while you're working. For instance, I am currently undertaking the postgraduate certification in competition and regulation economics that is provided by the Center for Competition Policy. And I think CMA makes it really conducive for you to undertake such programs. Not only do they pay for it, but it also counts as a part of your working hours to attend lectures. So it's a part of my 37 hours a week to attend the lecture. And they also give you study leave of 14 days, which is sometimes really needed when you have assignments and exams and casework to manage. So yeah, overall, I think the CMA as a whole really is big on training and support and will create conducive environments for you to grow further. So yeah, that's it from my end. With that, I think I'm passing it back to Michael.
Thank you. We're going to pass over now. So we were hoping to have someone joining us who was recruited through the previous Returners Programme in the legal team, but I'm afraid they unfortunately weren't able to join us, which is a shame. But we still hopefully share a lot of useful stuff for you. I'm going to pass over now to Martina again for a bit more detail on the application process.
Yes, thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, so I thought it might be useful to hear a bit more about how the application and interview process work here at the CMA to give us a bit of a better understanding. So at the application stage, you will be asked to submit an online application, which will be sort of which includes two parts. So the first one is sort of your CV, which should list sort of the qualification and employment history. And then the second part is sort of a personal statement where you can set out sort of how your knowledge, skills, and experience sort of meet with the criteria that are listed in sort of the job ad that you might have seen. So successful candidates at the sifting stage are then invited for an interview. The interview usually lasts for no more than 1 hour and can take place either online over Teams, like this meeting, for example, or in one of our offices in London or Edinburgh. So the interview can take different formats, but recent interviews have included just 2 economic questions and 2 or 3 competency-based questions, which are sort of questions that are intended to sort of understand how you would behave in certain situation, sort of test the more like this sort of the soft skills that Adish sort of touched on before. We also may ask you to prepare a presentation in advance of the interview on the basis of material that we send you a few days ahead. Or in other circumstances, we have asked candidates to carry out a written exercise an hour or so before the interview. You will then make your presentation to the panel at the beginning of the interview, or in case you carried out a written exercise, you will be asked to briefly discuss the content of the written exercise at the beginning of the interview. And the panel might ask you a few questions on that before going on to the 2 economics and the 2 or 3 competency-based questions I sort of said before. At the end of the interview, there is always sort of an opportunity for candidates to ask us questions on sort of the things that you may be interested in hearing more about. So that sort of was meant to give you a bit of a flavor of how the application and interview process works. I know, Michael, so you want to share some personal sort of experience on that, which sort of give you a bit of more color on the application and the interview process.
Yeah, so I just thought it was worth dropping in, as Martina said, a little bit of personal experience. So my prior experience wasn't directly in competition economics, which might be the case for some of you. And I found the application process really allowed me to draw out the breadth of relevant experience to answer the questions. And specifically in answering sort of economic scenarios, it's not about knowing, precise terminology or anything like that, but more about how you think through a problem. Applying broad economic principles to an issue that you've just been confronted with, and then how you explain those ideas to the panel. So yeah, it's about how you think rather than very specific knowledge for the sector.